Welcome to Yoga is Science, the podcast where Western medicine meets Eastern philosophy. I'm Colynn Vosburgh, a former emergency room nurse and medical student turned full-time yoga teacher. With over 200 teacher trainings taught, I've come to understand how yoga really is the original science of life. And I'd love you to join me as we explore the profound ways that ancient wisdom and modern science intersect to support healing, growth, and transformation. Let's dive in. Okay, so I'm super excited to be sharing today on the eight limbs of yoga. So, this is generally when I say like I teach yoga, people immediately ask me what kind. And I'm like, okay, cool. Do you really know like what my answer is going to be, right? If I teach hatha, like, are you going to know that hatha encompasses everything, or not? So, what I want to do is talk about a little bit more about what yoga really is. Because for me, taking yoga teacher training was like mind blowing. I literally took yoga teacher training to be better at yoga. Those were the words that I said. I don't actually plan on teaching. That's not my goal. My goal is to be better at yoga. And now here we are. So, what I discovered was yoga is so much more than I ever thought it was. So I went in, and for me, yoga was the poses. That's what I know as yoga. That's what most of us know as yoga. Yoga is this thing that's offered in a yoga studio, right? And what I found out is that like that's not yoga. Yoga is a little bit of the postures and is so much more. So, let's talk about it. Yoga has eight limbs. Okay? And those eight limbs are basically like a what Patanjali says is if you want to have a meaningful and purposeful life, here are eight steps that you can take to have a meaningful and purposeful life. So it's not yoga is all eight of those limbs, not just like poses. What you go into a yoga studio for, that's not yoga. Those are poses, those are postures. And unfortunately, most of those are taught to look a certain way. So you go to yoga, which is really like a whole lifestyle. You have an opportunity to like be there to lower the nervous system, like in activation, to like take a moment to think, to go inward, to be quiet. But what do most people pick? Most people pick something called vinyasa, which is a very fast-paced yoga. It's not even like really the way that it was originally, but it is what it is. So, if that's you, that's cool. It's okay. I'm not shit talking you. I'm literally like, here, you're welcome. There's so much more to it. Yoga is not an exercise, period. Yoga is an energy practice, and it helps us to get our energy moving. And part of that, one limb of that is the postures. So, what am I talking about? There are eight limbs of yoga. Let's talk about what they are. The very first limb is yama. Yama. What does that mean? When we translate that from Sanskrit, yama is it means restraint, like things not to do. Okay, so what do I not do? Right? Well, the first thing that we don't want to do is called ahimsa. It's non-violence. We don't want to be violent, and we don't want to be violent with other people. We don't also want to be violent with ourselves. And it's such a nuance, really, because what this looks like is like, do you ever worry about anybody? If you do, you're being violent. Okay, sit with that for a minute. If you worry about someone, that means that you don't trust them to live their own life. And that's violent. So your opportunity is to stop thinking that you're in control of anybody else and just trust people to live their lives. What would that look like? Okay, so first thing, and then the shit talking. that you do to yourself. Like literally, the things that you say to yourself are probably not kind and loving. And so therefore you're being violent with yourself. Okay, next one is like don't lie. So your restraints, don't lie. Don't be violent, don't lie, be truthful all the time. Don't be greedy. Don't be possessive. Don't hoard. Don't grasp onto things. And there's also, we've got aparigraha, we've got brahmacharya. So don't, I mean, brahmacharya is moderation. So it's like, don't be excessive, right? With anything that you're doing. And honestly, what we know in life is um, that everything done in moderation is healthy, right? If you work out crazy like all day long, that's unhealthy. Your body is going to break down. We know this because we can see this with like athletes. They're old in their 30s, but you literally have like 70, possible 70 more years. So here we've got these breakdowns of like, don't be violent, don't lie, don't hoard, or don't be excessive, and then don't steal. Those are the yamas. And then the next thing that we have are the niyamas. The niyamas are things to be. So what can I be? So we've got you should be clean and pure. Should, such an interesting word. I don't mean to use it because it means that if you're not, then you're bad and you're wrong. But the niyamas are like being clean and pure, not only with your physical body, but also with your thoughts, with your words, with your lifestyle. And then we have, why am I blanking on these right now? Like I know them so well. And then we have something called Santosha. Now, Santosha is contentment. I love this because as a way to live, right? Most of us live a roller coaster, right? If you have high highs, you're going to have low lows. So that's awesome when things are great, but it's like totally shitty when things are not great, right? And this is how most people live. And what we know for sure, like science, physics, the laws of physics, one of those laws of physics is for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. So if you are someone that's so passionate and like so all in, right, you will experience these times where things are freaking amazing. And you will also experience like you're all in on the sadness too. You're all in on the shit. And so this is your life. And Santosha or contentment is finding this middle path of yes, you have ups, but they're not so up. And yes, you have downs, but they're not so down. It's somewhere in between. There's something that Frik-shuhn, I say it really quick because I can't say it slow, is a Vietnamese monk that shares a story called the farmer's story. And the way that that goes is that, the farmer's out and his horse breaks free and the whole town comes and they're like, "Oh my God, your only horse, that's so terrible. He's broken free." And he's like, maybe, because he doesn't know, right? So then the horse is gone, and like, oh my goodness, what are they gonna do? And then the next day the horse comes back and it brings like two, three wild horses with it. So then everybody comes like, oh my God, you have three horses. That's so good. And he's like, maybe. So then the next day his son's out and he's breaking the horses and he breaks his leg. And so all of the town comes like, "Oh my God, you're only ranch hand. That is so bad." And he's like, maybe. And then the next day the army comes to town, right? And they're recruiting, but they can't recruit his son because his son has a broken leg. And they're like, "Oh my goodness, your son's the only son that didn't go. That is so good." So notice if we're attached, then yes, like, oh my gosh, my son breaks his leg. Oh my God, it's so bad. It's like, oh my God, I'll never shit. But then the next day, the army comes into town and won't take your son away because he can't fight. So we can never tell like anything. We cannot connect the dots looking forward. We can only do it looking back. So maybe if you trusted not only other people, but you trusted yourself and the universe, then you would recognize that everything is conspiring in your favor, regardless of your attachment to how it looks, right? So sitting with that. So that's Santosha. That's contentment. That's contentment with everything. Recognizing like one thing that Eckhart Tolle says is like, um, when it rains, let it. Right? How many people are like, oh, like their whole day is just messed because it's raining? Or another thing that Eckhart Tolle says is like, treat every moment in your life or all moments in your life like it's exactly what you asked for. So that means even when your son breaks his leg and everything's going down, if you were just in a moment of gratefulness, like, wow, well, I'm really glad that it was just a leg, then you start to act like you asked for this and you will behave in a different way, which will create a different frequency. One thing we know is that the universe doesn't speak English, right? The universe speaks in vibes. And I know that that can be like spiritual language right now, but it's also a little bit easier to understand. Like, what's your vibe? So if your vibe's always stressed, well, I mean, then that's what you're going to bring in. So we've got Santosha. Take a moment. We've got tapas. Thank you. We've got tapas, which is discipline. So within everything that we do, our tapas is kind of like our inner fire. So our tapas is our discipline, and it helps us to burn away impurities. And that can look different ways. Like sometimes if you're like an all out type A person, your tapas is to back off a little bit. Yet if you're not, then there is like in the modern yoga teacher mastermind, one of the focuses that I have is that we need to have non-negotiables. We need to do things that we do every day that help to ground us and take us closer and closer to our success. So what I know is that something that every successful in all aspects of their life, not just money, every successful person does is they meditate. And so if you're not meditating, what would that look like to make that one of your non-negotiables, right? That would change your life. Really, if you meditated every day for the next year, I promise you, you would look back on this day today and not even recognize yourself. So we need that tapas to continue to show up and meditate, even if it's busy, even if, something else is going on. So then we have Ishvara Pranahana, and Ishvara Pranahana is self-study. We need to look in at ourselves and we need to recognize. I keep saying need. You don't need to do anything. Yet, if you want to have a meaningful and purposeful life, these are things that you can do to have a better life. So, and one of those is like study yourself. If you're constantly blaming everybody else for everything, I mean, fine and enjoy your life. Like it's gonna suck because what you're looking for is everybody to change so that your life is better. And guess what? Nobody's going to. Your partner's not going to change. Your mom's not going to change. Your kids are not going to change. Your boss is not going to change, especially for you. Like, who are you? Right? So, who's the only constant in your life that can change? You. And part of that whole idea is that, like, if you're attracting in people that just drive you crazy, then you're attracting people in to support you in the changes that you need to make yourself. So if your boss is an asshole and you're constantly pointing like your life sucks because your boss is an asshole, I mean, you've given him all your power because he's never going to change. So your life is going to suck because of another person. Like, okay, cool. Like, enjoy your life. Also, maybe you need to change. Maybe you're an asshole. And that's why you attract in assholes. If the universe doesn't speak English and it only speaks energy, and like attracts like, you're an asshole. I'm just saying. And you can take it or leave it, but like, how are things going for you now? Everything perfect? Right. It's not. And that guy's an asshole. So, what would it look like to stop being an asshole? And to stop blaming everybody else for being an asshole? Just, just saying. And then we have again blanking, but this is always so good practice for me because I remember when I first started yoga, someone was like, "What's your favorite limb?" And I'm like, "Brahmacharya," and they're like, "No, that's not a limb. That's a yama." I'm like, "Oh, what's a yama?" So surrender to the divine. Ah, that's Ishvara Pranahana is surrender to the divine. Svadhyaya is self-study. There we go. So we've got Svadhyaya, which I have been explaining. And now we move into Ishvara Pranahana, and that is to like surrender to the divine. That is the connection with one. That looks at any way that you want to look at it. Lots of people are triggered by the word God. I mean, that's cool. You can be triggered all you want. But there's something, right? We live in a world of energy. You are atoms, I'm atoms, the air is atoms, this desk is atom, these electronical devices are atoms, and there's a frequency for you to even be watching this right now. So go ahead and don't believe in God, that's fine. But what if it was like you just don't believe in a dude sitting in the clouds judging every move you make? That might be more helpful. And maybe there's something more like energy, nature, whatever that looks like, the universe, and that is actually conspiring in your favor and that you're connected to that. That's the idea. I know that within yoga, sometimes the words like Lord of Yoga is used, and that can be super triggering. Honestly, stop being triggered. Like, do your work, figure it out. What's your version of God? Because this is something that I love. Okay, listen, if somebody's an alcoholic or a drug addict, and there is a proven program that works. Okay, it's called AA or NA. And someone goes to it, but they can't go and they can't get sober because the word God is used a lot. Like, and it's really clear, whatever your version is. And that's it. Like, there are what, between 9 and 12 billion people in this world. And so that means there's 9 to 12 different billion different versions of God. Okay? Because no one's right. And guess what? None of us are going to know until we die. And then when and if we come back, we're not going to remember. So nobody's right, but nobody's wrong. Each person gets to have their own version of that. And within the, like, if you want a meaningful and purposeful life, the very last niyama is connection with the divine. So what does that look like to you? It doesn't have to be like going to church. That's cool. To me, that connection and the way that I found peace, first of all, was being a nurse in the emergency room and watching an incredible amount of people die. And then coming to realize, like, oh, there's something there. Oh, there's nothing there. And then getting comfortable. And then also yoga. Yoga is my lifestyle, and yoga is my connection to God. Okay. So that's limb one, limb two. Limb three is asana, and asana translates to posture. Now, a lot of the time we get pose. It means pose. It means pose. Well, guess what? What do you do for a camera? You pose. And the problem with that, like I was speaking about in the beginning, is that if you think yoga is the poses and you think that there's an end point or a perfect look for a certain pose, well, good luck with that. Go on Instagram Asana, you'll find a bunch of people that agree with you. And those people are usually very thin. They're often of a white skin color, and not always. And they're young and they're uninjured. And so any of us that are not that are comparing ourselves to that, and then we're no good at yoga. And so I just say this, fuck you. That's not true. Yoga is this entire lifestyle, and it includes asana or postures, not poses, because postures never really end at a destination. Postures are ever evolving and dynamic. And postures have benefits, right? A forward fold, for example, a forward fold. One of the big benefits of that is stretching your hamstrings. But it goes beyond that. It helps actually with mental health. Forward folds can be rather invigorating. They can compress the contents of the abdomen, which is really helpful. And so there's benefits to this posture. So when you do this posture, you get the benefits, regardless of if it looks like Instagramasana Sally over there or not, right? Forward folding is going to support you in the ways that it can. So moving on, past asana is pranayama. Pranayama means your breath control, because we got yama in there, right? Breath restraint. And so this isn't breath work. This isn't holotropic breath work. This isn't kriyas, which are really detoxifying. It's explained within the sutras that there is a pause between the inhale and the exhale, or the exhale and the inhale. That defines pranayama. So that means breath control. That means, sure, I can breathe normal, but when I breathe in and I take a moment and then I breathe out, that's pranayama. Okay, there's other breath of fire and all these other things. Those are more kriyas that help us to detox. They're not pranayama. And then the breath work, holotropic breath work, that's not pranayama as well. Those are different. They're completely different. Okay. So pranayama is actually really helpful for cleansing our bodies as well. It helps us with our minds. It helps us to release blocks. Like your breath and your body are 100% connected, and that's connected to your nervous system, right? So the breath is just helps us with all the other things. When you're in asana, your breath is what's guiding you. And so it's just as important as all the other things. So as we move on, we move to the fifth limb, which is pratyahara. And pratyahara literally means sense withdrawal. So when you're looking out, that's this person's being an asshole, right? This person needs to do this. My neighbor needs to clean up his yard. Like out, 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 out. And it's looking with our senses too. So, like, let's just say if you want to make $1 million and you use your external space or your external senses, then what you're getting is like there's not $1 million in your bank account. So, your senses actually will contribute to your lack of success, right? Your senses aren't telling the truth. Your senses are really helpful in case there's major danger. But a lot of us aren't really on top of that. So we don't want to believe our senses because it's not the truth. If you want to make $1 million, you have to go within and you have to look at what the words that you're saying in your own head are, because that's what you're in alignment with, the deeper stories. And when you go in and you look and you see what we call your samskaras, or the stories that are on repeat, you have to change those. You change your frequency, you change your vibe in order to collect it in. So if you're just like, you're unlovable or you're unworthy, and you also want $1 million, guess what's going to win? Well, the fact that like deep down you believe you're unworthy, you're never going to have $1 million. And the senses are going to be like, look, I look in my bank account, there's not $1 million. And so you're just going to stay. You can say as many affirmations as you want. If you don't change your frequency, if you don't change your vibe, you stay exactly where you are. So pratyahara is looking within. And then we have dharana, and dharana is our sixth limb, and dharana is intense focus. So not only do we look within, but we also intensely focus. And that's what's going to change things for us. We intensely focus on, my story is I'm not enough, I'm not enough, I'm not enough. Right? I'm looking within, I'm seeing it. Now I'm intensely focused on finding that within me and rooting it out. So every time I say I'm not enough, I actually counter with I am enough and I am deserving. Our mantras, intense focus on our mantras, which brings us then to limb number 7. Now, the first 6 limbs are limbs, things that you do. And the last 2 limbs are things that happen to you because of the things that you do. So if you want a meaningful and purposeful life, you'll do all of these things. And what will happen is limb number 7, which is dhyana, which is meditation. Meditation. See, I love this because people are like, I'm not good at meditating. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Neither am I. I do it every day, but I'm still not good at it. because in order for meditation to happen to me, I need to go within and I need to focus. And then I will have an experience of meditation. All I have to do is show up and then do the work, and then the thing will happen for me. And so for me, my experience is like meditating isn't just like sitting there. For me, my experience of meditation is when there's just a moment where there's no time, there's no sound, there's nothing. I'm just like, I don't even know. Like it's just a moment of being in a void, and then something happens and I come back. And that's my definition of what meditation is. And it only happens sometimes. And so you also have the opportunity to experience that. But if you're always like, I'm bad at meditating, I'm bad at meditating, I'm bad at meditating, well, then that's the truth as well. And then we have the final limb, which is samadhi. And samadhi is like, listen, if we talk about the Matrix, okay, that's your homework, is to go and watch the Matrix. What we know is there's a couple things, right? The Matrix is like a simulation that we're all in. Well, guess what? You have a nervous system and you're looking outside of yourself. And how do I know that what I see, like this pen is black, right? I have a pen in my hand and it's black. But how do I know that like my version of black is the same as your version of black? Because what I know is like you don't see through your eyes. You have eyes, and the eyes let in light, and that light reflects off of rods and cones, and then that sends an electrical signal to the optic nerve, or that goes through the optic nerve, which sends an electrical signal to your brain. So you don't actually see through your eyes, you see with your brain. Same with hearing. How do we know that what we hear is the same? Why is it that when I hear me, I sound different when I'm talking, and then I sound different when I hear a recording of myself? Why is that different? And if I ask somebody else, is that how I sound? They're like, yeah, that's how you sound. So what's going on? You also do not hear with your ears. Your ears are created as canals to catch the sound waves, to direct them into one spot. Within that spot is, the sound waves go and they start to vibrate these three little bones. Remember the anvil, the hammer, and the stirrup? And they vibrate, and that sends a vibration through the cochlea, and then the cochlea will send an electrical signal from there into your brain. So you also do not hear with your ears, you hear with your brain. So we each have our own brain. We each have our own perspective. We have a nervous system. We have an amygdala. We have our whole lives and all of our experiences, and our amygdala is our lens. So based on your life and your experience of the world, that is what you see. So in the Matrix, right? You are in the Matrix. And when you start to realize that you can still see the Matrix, but maybe there's something beyond. And when you hit samadhi, when there's no more lessons to be learned, you will no longer need the Matrix, and the Matrix disappears. That's it. You go back to source. You go back to that which you originally came from. And that's a whole nother conversation or topic. And I myself have not hit samadhi. So I cannot also share from a space of experience. I mean, I have had an experience of enlightenment, which is different than samadhi. Just throwing that out there. Which is different than a Kundalini awakening. So the idea is like, once I've learned all of my lessons, I will no longer cease to exist. I will no longer need to be a part of where I am and what I'm in, because this outer world that I'm creating, that I see, that I know, is here purely for my very own benefit, just like it's for yours. And your benefit is different than mine. And so you are going to see things different. You're going to hear things different. Like it's going to be different for you than it is for me. And therefore, when we no longer need the lessons, then the lessons disappear and we cease to exist on this plane. So those are the 8 limbs. And they can be a very helpful way to look at your life, look at your world, and to kind of pull back a little bit from the drama and the bullshit. And honestly, your own perspective. If somebody makes you, have you ever heard anybody say like that makes me feel blank? Cool. What else power do you want to give somebody? Like, nobody makes you feel anything. Honestly, you feel a certain way, and that's valid and that's fine. But it's not somebody else that made you feel that way. Because that same person could say the exact same thing to you, to somebody else, and that other person will take it different because they have a different life experience than you. So, what would it look like to stop putting so much focus on your external world and do a little bit more work on your internal world? And then experience what that is like, looking from the perspective of kind of living in the matrix and recognizing that this is all just bullshit. And you are the one that gets to choose or decide where it is that you want to go and what you want your life to look like. And I mean, that's great. And I get to say it. And then I'm like, okay, bye. We're done now. I know it's not that easy. And I've been doing this work myself for many, many years. And it's still not perfect. But one of the things is like I can also detach from being so involved and just like living a roller coaster due to the eight limbs. So I hope that this time has been helpful for you to understand that that practice in the yoga studio is not yoga. It's asana. And there's so much more to yoga, which is why yoga teacher trainings right now are being completed like crazy. Because when you take a yoga teacher training, what we do is we start to dive in to the lessons and the philosophies of yoga, which is a different way to experience life. And when one has meaning and purpose, uh, they're not thinking about ways to die or how miserable their lives are. In fact, they start to see it like, oh, right? Just like right back to the beginning of me saying this, we can recognize like, oh, maybe, right? I don't know if this is good or bad. I just know it's happening. And I get to choose how I show up for it. And if I show up for it in like with a really shitty attitude and everything is terrible, then this is really going to suck. But if I show up with it with some curiosity and some gratefulness and some opportunity to recognize like there's more going on, then things won't suck so much. I'll leave with this. In Buddhism, there's a saying, and the saying is that pain is inevitable and suffering is optional. That means you can hurt, but you don't have to suffer. Now, I love this because it's easy to sit here and say, right? I'm Buddha, and I'm like, just don't let it, you just don't suffer. And the reality is, like in the last little bit, well, I just had a bladder infection. And it might be TMI for you, but that's cool. It's not for me. And I mean, I was with it. I've experienced it, and it's 10 times worse when I'm suffering, when I'm in pain, when there's nothing I can do, when I whine about it to everybody. Or this is what I'm dealing with right now, and here's the steps that I need to take in order to like feel better. I just got to deal with this. And not in a way like shut up, have no emotion, get over it. It's like here we are. And here's what I can do. I can drink more water to try to flush things out of my system. I can find some cranberry juice. I can go to a doctor and get an antibiotic, right? I can do so many things within that to not suffer terribly and just recognize like this is where I'm at. This is what's happening. And I don't really get to like, I mean, I can hate every second of it, but like, then I'll tell you guys, like, this is the worst thing I've ever been through, ever. And it's like, but it isn't really. It's suffering. And I get to choose because pain is but another sensation. And it's how I meet that sensation that determines my suffering within this world. So that's what I'm going to leave you with. Thank you so much for listening. And if you have any questions about the 8 limbs, please just let me know, reach out, and I'll answer them the best way that I can. So thank you so much for being here and have a day. See you later. Thank you for joining me on Yoga is Science. I hope today's episode offered you a fresh perspective on the incredible synergy between the ancient yogic practices and our modern day science. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with someone who could benefit from these insights. And until next time, keep exploring the science of life.